the Chicago area that is interested in entrepreneurship, wants help starting a business. We run different programs for both students and for graduates and just for community members in order to engage them and help them move their ideas along. So I'm very happy to be here with you all. I'll definitely put my email in the chat, and I'd love to connect with you after this. You're going to be hearing from Bhavan Joseph, who is our superstar alum and winner of our Purpose Pitch several years back, doing really cool things. So we're just so happy to participate in this and be here with you all. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Emily. And you guys are good at the segue part. It's like I don't even have to be here. You're just handing the baton off to the next person. This is great. Okay, for everybody who's participating, we're going to do this chat essentially in two parts. There's going to be a first part where we're going to hear from Brian Jenkins, who's the director of Ingenuity and Mox.E, who's the president of Ingenuity and Mox.E. I'll use as the term that I know he likes. We'll use the president. Ingenuity, founded in 1999, began with direct youth services with entrepreneurship education, and has expanded to include adult entrepreneurs and returning citizens, as well as training folks to teach entrepreneurship throughout the country. We have curriculum starting up now, 24 steps to launch. And Ingenuity also operates Mox.E, which is one of the sponsors of today. It's a Black-owned enterprise-level co-working space in Chicago, and a special emphasis on providing vital business resources to Black, Latinx, and women entrepreneurs. We're going to hear from Brian. Also has a great coffee shop on the first floor, which is excellent if you haven't been there. You need to visit there and get some pastries. We're also going to hear from Bhavan Joseph of the Greenwood Project. He's originally from Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean pride. I'm with you, Bhavan. Bhavan moved to the United States after high school to further his education, graduate of DePaul, as Emily mentioned. And Bhavan's career has been exclusively in the trading industry, specifically in tech, working at financial institutions such as JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, UBS, Chicago Trading Company, Peak Six Investments, and Achievement Asset Management. Greenwood Project is an excellent project. I really want to hear, I think everybody needs to hear more about, and it'll be great for this group to hear about, really bringing that expertise to a group that needs it more and more, and really building the pipeline for the future in the financial services with Black and Latinx folks. So that first part, we're going to hear from directly from Brian Jenkins. We're going to hear a presentation, and then essentially we're going to bring in Bhavan for a Q&A and a conversation after that. And then there'll be a part two where we hear from a panel. But part one, let's start hearing from Mr. Brian Jenkins. There you go.
All right, thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for attending. This has been, Adam mentioned that we just opened our Mox.E co-working facility here on South Michigan here in the Loop, and also our coffee shop as well. So we definitely would like to meet and greet you at some point in person, when COVID allows, but if you'd like to stop by, we would love to have that as well. So as Adam mentioned, I'm the president and founder of Ingenuity, launched in 1999 out of a lot of frustration. I had been in the field of entrepreneurship education. Actually, the Coleman Foundation was one of my first, actually Coleman sponsored the organization called the National Foundation of Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NFTE, as some people know it. So I've known Coleman for the past, 2 decades, I should say, and appreciative for Coleman, being a part of what we're doing as well. So, but just to jump in, I wrote this, part of this conversation has emerged from my involvement in the entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education, but also in the bigger picture is the nonprofit industry. One of the things that I learned is that in this industry, you have to recognize that it is an industry in and of itself. And those are some of the things that I did not know when I first launched when I first got involved with entrepreneurship back in 1993. And so I'm going to kind of walk through a little deck that we put together based upon a book that I wrote called, and the title is literally called "No More Nonprofits: Moving from Dependency to Sustainability." So it's a short deck, but I'm going to walk through. It's kind of like my journey and my pathway and things that I discovered along the way that would be helpful for others who, they're just starting out, or that maybe there's some things that their organization is going through that they need to reconsider as a relaunch. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump right in. And Adam, screen is good?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay. So one of the things that I discovered is a thing that we need to think through as we're working through our organization is, what problem is your organization solving and who asked you to be involved with it? This was something that I discovered a long time ago as I came into the west and south sides of Chicago. And there's just a plethora of nonprofit organizations, as many of us know. And the challenge that I often found is that there were many organizations that were working towards the same problem. There was oftentimes a lack of collaboration, and sometimes organizations had just shown up, oftentimes uninvited, and wanted to be a part of the solution, which can be a challenge to the community and those who are there. And so I think that one of the challenges that we always need to consider is, what are we solving? Who invited us? How are we also bringing others that are in the community, excuse me, to have an impact on what we're trying to accomplish? So, that's a question that Entrenuity asks. We ask this ourselves all the time. What are we trying to solve? And so that's something I want us to keep in mind as we move forward with the presentation. The one thing I also discovered too is that I was in an industry because I thought I had a good heart. I wanted to serve, but I needed to know a lot more about what I was walking into. So as of 2013, there were over 1.4 million nonprofits. And that's a huge number. And those are not just the ones in Chicago. I'm just joking, because there's so many nonprofit organizations in Chicago. But by Webster's definition, a nonprofit is an organization that's not conducted or maintained for the purpose of making a profit. The whole idea is, in my opinion, is to serve. And so that's one of the things that when I first got involved with this, I wanted to teach entrepreneurship to youth and adults on the west side of Chicago, but I had no idea that I was a part of something that was much bigger. And so one of the things that I think is important is that when we're in our organizations, we have to realize that we're part of a much, much, much bigger industry, and that industry has been around a lot longer than most of us have. One of the things I found out about Entrenuity is that we are in the education and training services industries. There's 67,000 companies, in the US and abroad, that generate about $47 billion annually. And so the things I thought, these are the kind of things I did not know initially, but have been, something that I've realized later on, that when we're meeting with founders or we're meeting with investors and donors and those types of things, they want to know more about your industry and what the opportunities for scale are. So these are some of the things I think, as in my area of entrepreneurship education, these are some things that we should know that typically sometimes a donor or investor will ask because they're looking to see, how can this organization possibly scale, or how their investment can really help you scale for a bigger impact. One of the things we also discovered is that this industry was started by Andrew Carnegie, or Carnegie, depending on where you come from and how you say it. But he was a business owner. He owned Carnegie Steel, and the key thing for him is that he encouraged many business owners to invest their wealth into society instead of the government. And that's something that many of us are, have experienced today. When we look at Entrenuity as an organization, we have received little governmental tax dollars. That's just not part of what we've done. But one of the things that we do recognize is that business owners want to invest in society in order to solve problems. Carnegie went on to later sell his company to J.P. Morgan, and that from the sale of his company, he essentially launched what we now call the modern nonprofit industry. He ended up donating more than almost $78 billion by the time he passed. But he single-handedly created this industry that all of us are involved with, those who are involved in the nonprofit industry. He influenced public policy for states and literally changed the charity statuses that allowed nonprofits to function and how we operate. And those changes are still in place as of today. The one thing that he did as well is that he had the support of obviously several politicians, obviously at the level that he was at, but the tax codes that he was able to change led to unprecedented growth in tax exempt organizations. So he's considered the godfather. I mean, it's a very interesting book that he wrote later on. It was kind of like the article, but the deal is towards the end of his life, he was actually concerned that he had also created too much dependency from nonprofits on federal dollars and on private dollars as well. So it's really something that's interesting, that this whole idea of dependency and independency that many of us struggle with as nonprofits. The key takeaways, there's several takeaways that I've learned over the years, but business ownership is the foundation of the modern nonprofit industry. There is no other way to understand that business influences everything, even in the nonprofit industry. The one thing that we found is that even in organizations such as what we call religious congregations and organizations or churches, mosques, if that number was factored in, the estimated contribution of nonprofits would be almost $1.2 trillion. So nonprofits are part of who we are as a country. They always have been, but there's tremendous growth and opportunity in this space as well. One of the things that when we do workshops, and I'll just kind of share a quick slide, is that we often ask and do team activities like, and when you look at organizations that are in your community, when you think of the organizations and businesses that have an impact in your community, and we ask people, make a list of these organizations, the ones that are actually doing the work, that are very influential, and what are they solving? What makes them unique? What is their core product or service? What is it, in another way, what is their secret sauce? How do they measure achievement? Who is their competition, and can it scale? So these are some of the things that I think of, what I've experienced over the years. And when I'm meeting with investors, we call our donors our investors. We don't, we use that term, interchangeably. But I look at the people who invest in Entrenuity's work, in order for us to make the impact that we desire. But one of the things they always ask is, what is our core product? What makes us unique? What makes us different? And many times, can it scale? So these are some of the things that when I launched, and launched Entrenuity, my background, I didn't have business, technically a business training background. I worked in the area of youth entrepreneurship education and learned, kind of cut my teeth along the way. But the one thing that I often found is that there were certain organizations that could scale up, and there were those that kind of stayed in the same place. And that's a question that we have to ask ourselves, as if that is our goal, do we have the capacity? Do we have the team in place? Can our organization grow? And the other thing too is it's not an evil thing to think through, but who is your competition? So when we're working with groups, when we're working with independent entrepreneurs, we push them to think like a business would. I like to say that our nonprofit status is simply a legal structure, not an operational mindset. And so that being said, when I launched Entrenuity, I didn't have the connections, I didn't have the donors, all of those things. I only could go out there. I knew how to teach. And so we had this principle that we've adapted, in the book, I call it the 70-30 principle. And that's where at one point, Entrenuity, 70% of all of our revenue came from earned income, and only about 30% through donations. And that was part of my survival strategy, because as when I launched Entrenuity, I didn't have a lot of the donors and a lot of the support. I was in another organization launching, I had some experience, I had a couple connections. But the one thing that I found is that anytime I was able to identify let's say a school, I would go to the school, and the school would end up paying about 30% of the cost for us to come in. And I would oftentimes find a donor or an investor to cover the other 70%. And so that's the way we built Entrenuity as an organization up until recently. And some of the research I was able to find when I was doing the research for the book, I found that organizations that could generate 70% of their revenue had a higher level of survival rate than those that were mostly dependent upon others' donations and gifts. So one of the things that we push here at Entrenuity, through through business ownership. Like of our coffee shops, the coffee shop here on our first floor is called Overflow. That's a Illinois, registered L3C. I'm sorry, we just switched over to the LLC. And we also own another one up north called the Common Cup in Rogers Park. Those are two for-profit businesses that Entrenuity actually owns. And those are revenue generators for Entrenuity as well. So the whole idea is that we can actually own and operate businesses as nonprofits that helps create long-term sustainability. And that's something that when I first launched, people were like, man, that, how can you do that? How can a nonprofit actually own, for-profit businesses? I was told I should not do that. Challenged by that oftentimes, but the business community was one of my greatest encouragements. They loved the fact that I was not completely dependent upon their own dollars, and the fact that I was, being a little innovative at a time when a lot of people were saying that's something that you can't do. Now, this is, of course, is going back in the around 95, 96. But now, that's, businesses creating sustainable revenue is the thing to do. We were a little bit ahead of the curve simply because we were trying to survive. And now it's something that's really made us attractive to some of our investors as well. There are 29 different types of nonprofit organizations. One of the things that you have to figure out is where do you fit in? What's your place? One of the things that we try to think through is that when we're working with organizations in a workshop, we create what we basically for lack of better words, a fake 990. And most of us know that a 990 is simply the nonprofits, reporting on its business activity from the previous year. Most nonprofits have to submit this every year. But one of the things I try to do is that when I go and connect with a donor or someone that I'm taking a look at, one of the things that we teach is that if the foundation, the donor, the private individual has posted their 990 or where they give, that's something that you should research, because you can oftentimes find out where they gave, who they give to, and sometimes how much. So you can develop, a strategy as to who you want to actually reach out to. So we call that, I call it auditing not only, the organization, but doing the research that we as nonprofit leaders should be doing based on the 990 that they have to report. And we take 3 years. Sometimes you can see a pattern that's developed if you have access to up to 3 years worth of their 990s. The other thing that's also important too, besides the 990s and the other things and the research, is what I call, which I think is probably the most important thing, is cultivating relational capital. Many of us know that people do business with people that they know and that they trust. And one of the things that we have found is that when we look at our donors, we want to be able to know, who they are. We want to know, where they give to, who serves on their boards, but, what's most important to them. And we develop this, what we call relational capital. One of our taglines here is coaching, connecting, and capitalizing. The connecting side is extremely important. As many of us know, there's people in our network that we, like at this point in my career, if I have an idea, it's literally getting on the phone or sending a text message over to our investors to say, hey, what do you guys think? Is this something that you might be interested in? And because we have this long-term relationship, the opportunity to grow the business, to take an idea from what I call from idea to invoice, we oftentimes can get some feedback and some immediate feedback on whether they're interested in learning more or possibly investing in this idea. So one of the things that I try to teach and talk about is that we need to develop what we call relational capital with those that we work with. And as part of doing that is constant communication. For Entrenuity, you can download our 990, you can pull up our annual report, but we try to be very communicative to our not only our investors, but also those that we work with. I know Angela just pushed out yesterday the Mox.E newsletter, which was which is ideal, but our donors and investors and others are paying attention, and they love the fact that we're communicating. But also, as nonprofit leaders, one of the challenges that I often see is that we do not communicate enough on the financials. So I oftentimes will send out quarterly financial reports, to our, those who are interested in them, so they can actually see where we are, as far as meeting our goals and our objectives. Is something that the Entrenuity team is working on right now. We're moving from a fiscal year to a calendar year. And that's a lot of work for our bookkeeper, our accountant as well. And of course, for Angela and Adam and those who are, running the different divisions of our organization. But the key thing is that we really try to push the transparency of our financials in order for us to be accountable, not only for ourselves, but also for those that have invested in the work that we do. And the last thing I want to talk about today so far, until we make our way around to Bhavan and the panel, is this is something that's very important to me, and most of us have seen how important being a person of character is. And there's the three T's I call it, tell the truth, be transparent, and you earn trust over time. Most of us have been in situations where, I know I certainly have, where you've had a situation not go as expected. And oftentimes you can be challenged to misrepresent the truth. And one of the things I'm proud to say is that we strive to, as part of who we are as an organization, that we always want to be able to tell the truth in spite of what the situation may be. And I have found over the years that high character, you want to be able to hire what I call high character people who are trustworthy. One of the things that I'm known for is I try, and this is something I'm trying to get past, is only hiring people that I know, because people that have proven themselves, that have demonstrated some level of capacity of not only competence in their area, but also character in who they are, because they represent me, they represent the Entrenuity brand, or one of our company's brands. So being a truthful person, especially in the climate that we're in the United States, with all the things that have happened over the last several years, but how important telling the truth is. The other deal, being transparent. I mentioned the 990, before, and what we do, but the key thing too is also, who is your leadership accountable to? When we have conversations with investors and donors, accountability is key. And that's the one area that I see a lot of times many nonprofits, they struggle with the area of accountability. Oftentimes we can make decisions sometimes on an island, but every decision that we make is something that we're accountable for. And my board of directors, and my advisory board, others who are around me, they hold me accountable. And that's something I really learned to appreciate over the past several years. And lastly, I always say this: trust is earned one step at a time. Do what you say you're going to do, and report on both your successes as well as your failures. We always want to focus on our failures. We oftentimes, bring up our successes, of course. But the thing is you earn trust. Trust is everything to me. The people that are typically here at Entrenuity, I work with them. I've known them for years. When people come on, we're growing as an organization. So I'm not able to get to know every single person that's a part of the Entrenuity team, or the Overflow team, or Common Cup team. But I really try to encourage those who are running those different companies or departments, how important trust is to me as an individual. If we don't have trust, we really have nothing, in my opinion. And so, these core principles, being truthful, being transparent, and earning trust over time, is one of the ways that we've been able to build Entrenuity. A good friend of mine on our advisory board, a guy by the name of Mark King, several years ago, when I was like most nonprofits, we were struggling, trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And he basically pulled me aside and said, "Brian, you don't really need to worry about the money. You need to execute, make sure you execute on what you said you're going to do." And I learned, and actually that was probably 7 or 8 years ago that Mark told me that we were around a $500,000 organization, and now we're around $2.5 million. And one of the things is we've grown, and when I learned to let go of always focusing on the money, but really focusing on creating the best product, the best service, that I could as an organization, we have seen a significant shift in how we have functioned as an organization. So I would encourage anybody is that you get people around you that you can trust, that are what I say, they're going to tell you the truth even when you don't want to hear it, because they're really there to help you grow, and that comes over time. A lot of the people that are around me now, I've known for several years, and they don't always tell me what I want to hear. They tell me what I need to know, and that's what I would encourage you to do, in your organizations as well. So with that, I am going to turn it back over, I believe, to Adam.
I'll take it. Yep.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Appreciate the look into how how Entrenuity has used its nonprofit status and moved kind of in between the worlds and been innovative. Want to bring and that's allowed it to grow and thrive. Want to bring Bhavan into the conversation. Bhavan Joseph is, as I mentioned before, director of the Greenwood Project. Is that the right title, Bhavan, director?
Well, co-founder along with my wife, and now the executive director.
There we go. Okay. Got to mention your wife. So we'll say co-founder. That's the most important. We'll call you that, and definitely want to bring him into the conversation so that we can talk about another nonprofit that's also done innovative work in order to kind of grow and thrive in that environment. So I also want to make sure I mention before we move to the conversation, we are a sponsor. This conversation is sponsored. I'm really thankful to have Chicago Community Loan Fund as a sponsor, one of the sponsors as well. If you don't know them, their website is cclfchicago.org. They're a community development financial institution found to provide a source of flexible capital and technical assistance to support community development, providing equipment and working capital and stabilization efforts that benefit low to moderate income neighborhoods throughout Metro Chicago. Let me give you that website one more time. And if we could put that in the chat as well, I'll put it in once I stop talking. www.cclfchicago.org. Thank you so much. They're also one of the sponsors for this. So Bhavan, let me bring you in on this conversation and have Brian, you and Brian have a conversation about how you two have both approached this topic. And actually, here, why don't I ask you a question first, Bhavan? We're talking a little bit about how Entrenuity has, started as a nonprofit and has also done kind of for-profit or charge services. I mean, it looks to me like, if we look at the Greenwood Project, that's also the approach you took to sort of starting your organization and giving it kind of a foundation to thrive. Can you address why you did that?
Yeah, so the mission of Greenwood Project is a pretty simple one. We find Black and Latinx students and we connect them to career opportunities in financial services through internships, via high school programs. But the organization exists because myself and my wife spent 20 plus years working in financial services. I was in New York for 20 years, she's from Chicago. But all the firms we worked at, we realized that internships themselves have become a privilege. You had to be connected to or know the right people. And all the interns I met over the years were either related to or connected to somebody at that firm. So that's the reason why we exist. That's why the organization was started, came out of our own story. Brian talked about, understanding the problem we're trying to solve, and is that something actually needs to be solved? So I think initially we wanted to do some good in the world by using our own social capital to help students from underserved communities gain some social capital. So never in a million years, we thought we would be running a nonprofit 5 or 6 years later. It just happened that way. And I think something Brian touched on as well, like when you're solving a problem that, you yourself have experienced, that's different. That's very different when you start a business that comes out of your own experiences, because it means so much more to you. So we started as a nonprofit 501c3. We're still that designation today. But along the way, we've become almost like default diversity recruiters for a lot of firms because our young people, the more and more alumni we had, companies today are still calling like, do you have any students looking for entry level jobs? We have some rotational programs. We have this, we have that, and the idea kind of like is well, this is our time, this is our effort, this is our resources that is going into this stuff. So I think my view is, coming from a financial services background, never having run a nonprofit before, but my mindset is always like thinking how a trading firm thinks, which is it's all about maximizing your profit and making money and doing well and becoming sustainable. So even though we're a nonprofit, we are, I mean, sustainability is key, right? And we said, well, let's try to monetize the things that we do well, right? Not enough nonprofits, I think like that. Nonprofits, I believe, some of them, well, most of them think they just raise money and give it away. And like Brian said, it's a business. It's actually still a business, and you have employees, you have overhead, you have infrastructure, you're trying to grow. We're going through a growth period right now, which 2020 really accelerated with the Black Lives Matter movement and the pandemic and us being virtual and coming back to something else Brian talked about, execution. So even though it was the world was upside down, a lot of nonprofits went out of business pretty much, but it was a total opposite for us. Partnerships increase, number of students are going to increase. The budget is exploding. We're going national and even international into London as well too. Again, given our mission to serve Black and Brown students from underserved communities, a lot of companies came to the table and said, we want to help. How can we help? And I think when you get asked that question, you should have a long list of ways for them to help. You should have a menu of ways for them to help because some firms just want their employees to be engaged. They just want to, say we're supporting this organization. Some will write you a check. Some will take interns. Some will use their platform to amplify your message on social media or whatever it is, or get you interviews with, mainstream media people. I think when you get asked those questions, you should definitely have an answer every time and give them multiple ways to help. If they want to help, we can help them help pretty much.
Can you address, I just want to put a quick pin in that because I love this point. Can you talk about that as relates to the concept of value? Because you're, like you said, somebody calls you and says, how can I help? Essentially what you're looking for is the value proposition on both sides, right? And sometimes that can include money. Can you talk a little bit about that, even as a nonprofit, how you've approached that conversation?
Yeah, I think, we are very transparent with the way we've grown and it's been really organic. It's been, boots on the ground, on the front lines, getting the work done. And a lot of corporations talk about being more diverse and stuff like that. But we show them where the money's going. Like it's very transparent. We know the cost per student. We know our numbers, like Brian, you got to know your numbers, right? So you go into these meetings still understanding that even though these firms want to do good and do well at the same time, for them, it's still what's the return on my investment? Will your students want to work here one day to help my firm be more diverse? Can you help them make that decision? So I think understanding that, hey, a lot of people want to do well and do good in the world, but at the same time, these are for-profit companies that are looking to be more diverse, right? And we represent something that they cannot or have not been able to do themselves. So for a long time, I personally didn't understand the true value of what we were doing because I was just trying to help students. I thought I would just help 5 kids every summer and keep my day job. That 5 has turned into 350 plus. So when I understood the value of what we were bringing to the table, which was here are kids from Roseland, Inglewood, the west side of Chicago, going to small schools across the country, state schools that don't get a look, and we're able to go find them, get them ready, polish them up, and bring them to the doorstep of Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs is like, well, we go to that same school. How come you were able to find them and we couldn't? And I say, well, don't assume everybody wants to work for you. And don't assume everybody knows who you are. Like we find the kids who don't know who you are, but they're very smart and they need help getting ready to go through those interview processes and get those internships. And we provide all that support. So I think it was helping these firms realize that, listen, all the money in the world, all the resources in the world, doesn't help you connect with a population that we serve. So I think the value proposition for us is all the HR departments, all the heads of diversities at all these firms cannot find the kids that we could find, right? They come to schools like DePaul, UIC, U of I, Champaign, but we have so many students at those schools that those organizations still can't reach. because the kids don't come to career fairs. They don't know who the brands are. They have no idea who UBS is, right? We educate them about that from a very early age in high school. So again, the return on the investment is might take 3-4 years for that kid to be able to go through that interview process on their own. But that goes to a bigger story of systemic issues in the country, right? So in this population in particular. So for us is being very transparent, Adam, about where the money is going, all the wraparound services that these kids need, all the support. So if it's $12,000 per college kid to get them ready, that's what it costs. And then we still have an organization to run. We still have staff. So it might cost you $25,000 to get involved. It's I mean that's just the cost to run a business, and not saying give me a donation and then we cannot give it away.
Right. And it makes perfect sense because like you talked about, your costs really flip on the other side to a value that's way higher for them. So you think
So we might
about
be
like,
underpricing.
well, yeah, like that's ultimately that becomes the equation, because you start to think, like you said, people just don't even know the questions to ask. Some group of students, some groups of people, some neighborhoods, whatever it is, just don't know the questions to ask to access the opportunities. So even without maybe larger societal pushes in certain directions, some people just need to know what the right question is. They just
Yeah.
need to know early enough, in their schooling, how do I get to point A if I wanted to get there? What's the first step? And yeah, there's a huge amount of value in that.
Yeah, definitely. The education is not just for us educating the students, but we educate the firms as well, because many of them are hiring Black or Latinx students for the very first time, and they're asking us to come in and help them understand how to manage the students. So I think one thing I learned, I'm a alumni of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. And one thing I realized, I was the only nonprofit in a cohort of 23 businesses. And I didn't think I belonged there, but I realized quickly that, again, for profit or nonprofit, it's a business. You still gotta like function, and if you're trying to scale, and you can scale a nonprofit. That's what we're doing now. We're going out across the country and internationally to London as well too. So I think it doesn't matter if it's for profit or nonprofit. You gotta raise money, you gotta invest it. And one thing I heard recently last week was Van Jones was talking about corporations being good citizens, corporate citizens, and he was saying a grant is not the same as an investment. So when you talk to these firms, tell them like you're making an investment here that's gonna pay off. It might not pay off for you because I can't make the kids come to your company to work, but it'll pay off for the industry, and it'll pay off for society, and it'll pay off for the south side of Chicago. And do you want to be a good citizen? Do you want to do that? Right? The answer has to be yes. Nobody's ever said no to us yet.
Yeah, and even just I love that framing, the idea that you have to even just change the mentality when you say the word grant or investment. As you've approached making investment, or so asking people to invest, or even sometimes maybe making a grant, what have you faced any specific challenges or questions in the room, like you being a nonprofit, that maybe people who are thinking of shifting to this kind of an approach, have you faced any specific questions you think they might need to be ready for, or what kinds of things come up when you bring this up?
So I think early on, like within the first 3 years of Greenwood, it was all about, do you have any proof that this works? Do you have any? We do this already. We have a diversity program. We work with this company, we work with that company, and it's just all about showing them how different you are, and the differentiator for us. And we've proven this. It took us 3 years to really prove our model works, and that's probably the same time frame for a for-profit startup thing as well too. Before they started making investment, a lot of foundations don't even give you a look until you've been in business for 3 years. That's something I learned because we were banging on doors. Nobody was listening to us. William Blair, the investment bank here in Chicago, was the first one to take a chance on us. And we had to pitch them in a pitch competition with 60 other nonprofits that we ended up winning. And I think we are the tiniest nonprofit to ever win that competition too. So they took a 4-year investment in us. Typically, they invest in nonprofits for 2 years, but for us, the story matched what they were doing at that time. And that's something else, I think. Understand that your pitch has to really align with your strategy. If you're like, we're in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So understanding, doing your research on that company. What are they doing right now? I mean, William Blair just made an investment, a significant one in 1871 in a Black founders kind of thing. I mean, pay attention to the news, right? What are these companies doing now that aligns with what you're doing? And you kind of cater your pitch. Same thing as if you go to I tell every student, have a different resume for every job, right? So the pitch has to really align with what the company's values are. Find an advocate in there that could be a super fan. We found that at William Blair. He actually saw me at the poll. This probably I need to give Emily another shout out at the entrepreneurship center. It was that competition that I won at 1871 that a William Blair employee was in the audience. And he saw me pitch. He had to leave. He didn't even know that we won until the next day. And he reached out to me and he said, you know what, I think my firm might be really interested in what you guys are doing. And that's how that led to a $200,000 investment in Greenwood and a 4-year partnership. Again, I tell everybody that don't be shy to talk about your business, even if it's in front of one person or 1,000 people. So again, thanks. I want to thank the Paul again for putting me on that stage pretty much, and getting the message out and connecting with somebody from William Blair.
Yeah, thank you again, Emily. That's great. The question on when you've been, as you've been in these rooms, one of the things I think I was talking to some people who are going through an entrepreneurship class last night, and they're all kind of very beginning. They're just pitching their ideas for, businesses all the way from, really, really small kind of laundromat, coffee shop sort of businesses to, bigger structural subscription types of businesses. One of the things I kept stressing for them was focus on what you actually do. Like so a lot of them started with these businesses that did 15 things. And I was like, get down to the 1 or 2 things you actually do. Did you find that that was important with Greenwood, or did you find the opposite? Did people want you to do more? Kind of how, when you were pitching people, what was most effective? Like, I'm a nonprofit that has some for-profit services. We're going to sell things. This is what we're about. Was it 1 or 2 things that really rang the bell, or did you have to kind of go wide and then end up focusing?
I think a lot of organizations so our funding has primarily come from private companies in the trading space and financial services space. But I think the fact that we always preach being sustainable, which goes back to Brian's point of not trying to be dependent, right? So a lot of organizations, they want to make significant investments in Greenwood, but it's great to get the money, but they want to know that when the 5-year partnership ends, are you going to fall flat because you've been dependent on us? William Blair was the same thing. Like, prove to us that you can be sustainable. What is the model to become, don't have to need William Blair in 4 years when they step away, right? There is not a big hole in the budget. So I think for us, it's always focusing on what are our plans to, like, for example, one of our goals is to add 10 or 15 new corporate partners every year, right? We have like 99% retention for corporate partners, but still our goal is, we know there's a lot of firms out there who we can reach. Again, it's just all about proving to them that, yes, we need your investment, but we're also on a path to becoming more like independent, sustainable. One of the things we're going to launch is an impact fund, for example, which is a slash kind of hedge fund idea we've had for a long time, where students come there to learn how to, like, portfolio management, investing, everything that goes into the hedge funds, how to start it up, and get investors to put money into it with the proceeds, some of the fees and stuff going back into the nonprofit arm. So you really are creating a fully sustainable, like, ecosystem, Greenwood ecosystem, which shows the, again, investors could get a return on their money and also do good at the same time and feel good about it. Tied into the whole ESG, thing that's hot right now as well too, with the nonprofit arm of Greenwood being the actual ESG. So again, thinking about different ways that appeal to different people, and to answer your question, we have been asked to replicate this for, like, professional services or healthcare. We can't do that because that's not my expertise, maybe when we have a huge organization, then we can hire some people, but Deloitte and all these firms have access to do things for them, but AbbVie has access to do stuff in healthcare. And again, my background and my wife's background is financial services. That's what we do. Our board is all financial services professionals. So I think we've been successful because we stay in our lane and we do what we do best, and we become subject matter experts at it here in Chicago, and now getting a little recognition nationwide as well.
Yeah, I think of that. That's really helpful. I think of that sustainability narrative as one that it's a circle that connects back on itself, and it tends to be tighter than then we assume that it is in typical kind of approach to a nonprofit, which is that we're here to do good. Give us money and we'll do good. It's great, but that is so wide that, if you can find a story that's cohesive and it says, this is why we started what we started, this is how we exist in 10 years, there's a tightness to that circle, which is very attractive. So that's great.
And you mentioned students as well. I talk to students all the time, like for entrepreneurship classes, and I've been at the pole judging some like student competitions. And again, you're right. A lot of people have a lot of ideas. They're passionate about a lot of things, but passion is great. But I always say passion is my fuel, but execution is what gets me mileage, because you gotta execute. You could be passionate about a lot of things, but never do anything about it, right? So, and entrepreneurship is not for everybody, because it's a very lonely place, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices that nobody else might be willing to make. And that means, like, when you have family, you have whatever it is, leave a job. I didn't pay myself for 3 years, so, and left my job as a CTO at a hedge fund to do this for free, because I saw, the thing is, I took that leap because everybody that I talked to about Greenwood, the idea, not even anything material, there's like, I want to help you. Everybody said, I want to help you. This is a good idea. I want to help you. And that goes back to, I think, Brian's point of character. Like, we are able to go to the New York Stock Exchange, Open Bell every year in New York with students because my friends were there. And when I tell them what I'm doing, it's like, yeah. And visitors are not allowed on the floor. You could go up to the gallery, is not even open anymore, right? So UBS, Goldman Sachs, all these places, I have friends there still that left on good terms, and they're all people who care about things like this. They're all diverse people as well, diverse backgrounds, and they're inside and they're seeing the lack of diversity at their firms, and they realize that what we're doing can help their company, can help society, can help these young people. So I think I like to say Greenwood is a overnight success, 20 years in the making, because 20 years is what my career was in financial services, but now that's led to this thing. So looking back, I would never change a single thing about how I got here, because I think that's what makes Greenwood a success.
Yeah, that's great. Really appreciate you sharing that. Really helpful stuff for everybody to hear as they try to navigate this for themselves too. Angela, you wrote me a question here. Let's see. It says, question I've found. Entrenuity and Greenwood are doing things outside of the typical nonprofit box. Has there been any legal implications that have been challenging, or any questions you've had to face? Brian, I'll let you start with this one first, and then Bhavan, I'll let you answer it if you guys have faced anything.
Yeah, when we first launched, like I was saying in my presentation, people were shocked that I was charging for my services. They kind of like what Bhavan said, they expected you, because you're a nonprofit, to go in and just do it for free, and they still do. It's part of what I call the nonprofit culture. That's the mindset that we're used to, quote unquote, giving things away, or we take things, other people's junk, and try to make miracles out of them. I don't do that. I value who I am. I value those that we serve. And so I thought that when I went to a classroom, I was going to make sure I was fully prepared. I'm bringing a value, to the school, to the classroom, to the after school program, whatever it may be, and so we have to value ourselves. And that's why I was charging, the rates that I was charging. And so some people initially were like, well, you as a nonprofit should just take less. You shouldn't charge, and you should just give everything away and be happy with what you're working with. And, part of my challenge was I didn't come from this nonprofit culture where, where we thought we're supposed to work with the least and still produce with excellence. I believe in producing excellence with excellence. And in order to do that, you have to have a certain mindset, about yourself and those that you serve. And so that was part of, in my opinion, of this cultural shift that's now occurred. But 20, 25 years ago, that was not the case. And some of us have experienced, when the corporation says, hey, we're going to give computers away. And literally, you're going to pick up computers that have, busted keyboards, the screen is cracked on the monitors, or they don't work. And you're expected just to say, thank you, and you pick up 30 computers and maybe one of them might work, and that's a challenge. So so part of it is in this nonprofit culture that we're in, we have to value ourselves. We have to value the service that we're bringing and providing. and that also communicates the expectation of excellence from those that you actually serve as well.
Vaughn, yeah.
Yeah, it was so on legal implications. So it seemed like Brian talked on in his talk earlier about a nonprofit having a for-profit arm. Like I thought that wasn't a thing. I didn't know that was possible. The Goldman Sachs program actually helped me realize that it is possible because the resources there were like legal, folks and stuff like that. We also have some board members who've been very generous with letting us leverage their legal folks as well to help us get started. So getting started took us like 6 months to really figure out the right structure, what we should be, right? And again, I'm not a legal person. I have no expertise there, so I try to find those people who know those things best and can answer those questions. But yeah, you could totally start for-profit businesses or arms of a nonprofit. That's possible. People do it all the time. I know several nonprofits in the city of Chicago that are doing that right now. They have 5, 6 businesses. As long as it's tied to the core mission of what you're doing, you could do that 100%. And the other part of the question was, yeah, definitely they're very different. I think we're always trying to be innovative. We leverage technology a lot. I think my experience personally working with a lot of like legacy nonprofits who've been around for a long time, we move way too fast for them. Like so we try to partner with a lot of nonprofits, but they're just they can't keep up. And the firms we work with, they're all technology driven. We work with a lot of fintech companies now, and they love the fact that we're launching our own app, we're building our own LMS right now, we're doing all these things, like that's just the world I come from, and that's the world, the mindset I have. So a lot of nonprofits just cannot keep up with the pace at which we move, which is fine with me. We're making a difference, and we love to bring them along with us. But I think we've found a niche that we've kind of plugged into, and the financial services industry is doing very well, right? Despite how the world is off, they're doing very, very well. There's a lot of money to be made by students. There's a lot of money there for like grants, foundation. These big corporations all have a foundation arm. That's who you need to go after for money, because regardless of how the firm is doing, the foundation always is going to have their mandate to give money out, right? So every conversation we always ask, do you have a foundation that we can talk to? You can make an introduction, because sometimes the money can't come from the corporate side because they're not doing well financially or whatever. They didn't make a profit this year, but the foundation arm is always going to be there. If you're dealing with an investment bank, ask them to put you in front of their private wealth management clients, because they're always looking for ways to give, right? So those are just some of the things I've seen, personally, and the ways we try to think out of the box as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Again, we did get a question another question, but I'm wondering if it might not be a little bit, we might not be able to rewind too much, but I do want to mention it if you guys want to say anything specific. Any specific advice for nonprofits trying to expand their financial resources beyond grant dependency? Some of what you said obviously applies. If there's anything more specific you wanted to say now, I wanted to give you guys the chance.
I mean, I would say when you think about sustainability, we don't just think about it as financials. We talk about infrastructure. So we've been asked to expand our numbers many times by the city, by CPS, whatever. And we said no, because we didn't have the people. Like, it was myself and my wife for a very long time. Now we're like 5 or 6 people. We'll probably be like close to 9 by the end of this year. Our budgets have increased like 1,000%. I mean, we've gone from $180,000 budget in 2019 to like 2.5 million now, and going national and international. So, sustainability is not just money, it's actually people and infrastructure. Because bringing the right people on board, I think, is really going to help you be able to execute. It just comes back to execution. When I get asked like what keeps me up at night, besides my 18-month-year-old, it's execution. Like, how do we execute? We have all these great companies, Morgan Stanley, Goldman, everybody's saying, yes, we want to work with you. Yes, we're going to attach our names to you. So for me, it's all about, we have to do what we say we can do and keep the standard high as well.
Yeah, I would jump in and say too that it's not always about expanding your bottom line. It's about what I use the term PSA, not public service announcement, but problem, solution, and action. Identify the problem, create a marketplace solution, and execute an action. That's where I think that sometimes where you can get pulled into, out of your core business if you're not prepared. part of your staying in your mission and your vision, but also being able to stay open to opportunities. So when we bought the coffee shop a couple of years ago, when we were in the Daystar building, I didn't know anything about coffee at all, literally. I mean, I don't know that much more about it now. We got a good team of people that are running that side of things. But the one thing I realized right away was, even though we had the cash to buy the business, I didn't have the leader to run the business. And so the key thing that I needed to do was to get, who's now been here for 3 years, is Carrie Pendleton, our coffee director, who was excellent. And that's what she does. She knows coffee. And so you cannot typically, a successful business or organization doesn't expand beyond its leadership. And sometimes you actually have to say no. It's, when if you think it's an opportunity, if you're not able to execute on that opportunity. And then, the other thing that you have to be able to be is accountable for the decisions that you make, to someone, because even though we had the cash from an investor, there was still an expectation that if we were to move forward, that we were going to execute. And so we have to be, as nonprofits, we have to execute with precision and with excellence, and also be accountable.
Yeah, great. Appreciate those answers, and appreciate both your times. Thank you, Brian and Bhavan. We're going to move to our panel portion. So yeah, we'll give them a clap. Emily was given a clap. We're definitely going to feel free to add any other questions you might have. Send them to me, send them to Angela or Olivia, who's also in the chat, I believe. And we'll pass those along. This won't be the last time I'm sure we'll speak to Brian again. I hope we'll speak to Bhavan again. I'm sure that they could make themselves available potentially, but if you have any other questions, we'll pass those along as well and try to get you answers. So thank you both so much. Appreciate it. Going to move to the panel now, and we've got three great folks coming on in the panel. I want to introduce all of them, and you guys can open your mics so that when you speak, you'll fly to the top of the list. Elizabeth Carter, crowdfunding, a securities attorney, and she represents investment funds, small businesses, nonprofits, cooperatives with the strategy and compliance of raising capital from both accredited and non-accredited investors. Elizabeth is somebody who I've spoken to on a number of occasions, and one of the things we're going to do, I'm sure, Elizabeth, together this summer is our crowdfunding focus. A great advocate, somebody who's a practitioner in the space, and a great resource. So glad to have you on, Elizabeth. George Burgandy, did I say that right, George? Not Burgandy, did I say it right? Burgandy? I'm from upstate New York, so
George might be a minute late. He's running from another meeting, so.
No worries. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, you did say his name correctly.
Yes, you
I did. Andy? Okay, all right.
Yes.
Upstate New York, we use the long A, Buffalonians use that long A. He is the director instructor of the Master of Science in Sustainable Management program. And this is, he also serves as the partnership and development manager at Current, Chicago's water innovation hub, where he focuses on creating new opportunities for engagement among Current's diverse stakeholders. Very excited to have some people really putting sustainability, even in some very literal ways, into practice here. And then also Brad Jeffrey. Brad, thank you for joining us. I see you on there. CEO and co-founder of the Made Free brand, United States-based low-profit social enterprise. The Made Free model was designed to provide sustainable social reform, addressing the root cause of slavery, including human trafficking and poverty. Every purchase supports a day of freedom from slavery and poverty through a self-sustaining job. Really appreciate that model, and just the boots on the ground practicality of sustainability in that circumstance. So glad to have you with us, Brad. So definitely want to hear from all of you. Why don't I start with, since my mother brought me up correct, and I have three sisters, we're going to start with Ms. Carter. What are some of the alternative sustainability options for social enterprise or nonprofits that you've seen? And hi, George, we see you there. What are some of the sustainability models that you've seen, social enterprises and nonprofits use, and how have they interacted with you, and you've seen them work with you as an advocate?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for that lovely intro, Adam. Well, I would start with social enterprises because the way I define them are, they include benefit corporations, and in the state of Illinois, also the low profit limited liability company. Very different, but both with the intent to provide some type of social or environmental benefit in addition to receiving investment or making investments or engage some type of for-profit business entity or enterprise. And within the social enterprise realm, I think there's some confusion as in, like what's the difference between them and the general corporation? Well, the best way to explain it is that, and general corporations particularly were, created really, really long ago with the intent to, promote capitalism and to really garner as much profit as possible through an entity, limited liability entity. Sometime later, much later, the idea of benefit corporation or the social enterprise concept within for-profit entities came about with the idea that, okay, in addition to making profits, we want to also understand that, we have an impact on our neighborhood or our community and our environment, also on our workers, right? And how do we, make sure we can have those considerations for our employees, the social benefits in the community, as well as the environmental considerations. And there's certain stated sort of, what depends on each state, certain stated benefits, whether general or specific, that you can put in your charter to make sure that you're accountable to those interests. And so what makes it different is that if the general corporation tries that, the shareholders would have a legal right to sue the company or the corporation, saying, hey, they have a, say for instance, this is a corporation that sell coffee worldwide, and want to maybe certain areas of the world want to, maybe provide a discounted coffee, a coffee brand, or maybe for free. And some shareholders are just upset with that, saying, hey, you're really cutting into our bottom line. We can come together, or we can, have a right to sue, right? Sue the company for that because they're interrupting our investment, our shares. Whereas in the benefit corporation or a limited, low profit limited liability company, that profit motive or that sort of benefit, social benefit can be considered. And so the legal right to sue is not the same, or at least it's not there in terms of that aspect. So that's pretty much the biggest thing. In terms of raising capital, they can raise capital like any other for-profit or general corporation. What I mean by that is they can engage in investments, whether through passive investments like the stock, or it itself raise capital from the public through direct public offering, through crowdfunding, through private investment. Really, it's the same. It's really just so long. I think what they're going to do though is look for mission-aligned investors, those who are okay with having these social or environmental considerations in addition to profit, where general corporations will look for those who, or the main investors be those who just want profit, to maximize the profits at all costs. The nonprofit actually is different, although a corporation, it's a corporation that do not have shareholders, that cannot seek the same type of investment as a social enterprise or even general corporation can. And what I mean by that is a nonprofit can receive investment, but only in a form of debt. And so obviously there's banks and there's traditional banks that will lend to nonprofits, but that's not what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about, having individual sort of mini lenders through crowdfunding is one aspect where a nonprofit organization can receive capital under its own terms, right? It can be slow capital, it can have really low or no interest rate, whatever its own investors, also probably mission aligned, most likely will agree to. So that's an alternative way for a lot of nonprofits to get, to really get capital, especially those who are traditionally ostracized from banking or even philanthropy, if they're not as, really would have those relationships that are built to help assist with that. So they can really reach out to his own community, whether it's stakeholders or the constituents that it serves, really reach out and allow those to become mini investors. So that is one way, and that's considered a nonprofit direct public offering or crowdfunding. There are certain federal exemptions and some state exemptions that allow for the nonprofit to do that at a lower cost than a for-profit corporation. I'll also say, and I'm sure Brian spoke about this because that's what Ingenuity is. Ingenuity itself, and like nonprofits like Ingenuity, are able to engage in its own enterprise, which is different from raising capital through crowdfunding. In that, with that, when the nonprofit decides to do that, the nonprofit is creating another entity at a subsidiary, where the subsidiary is actually the for-profit entity bringing revenue back to the nonprofit. That's one way that the nonprofit can engage in that. Some considerations though to consider, because it's in a 501c3, you have to be careful as to how, because when you're a parent company of a subsidiary, you're acting as a managing member or majority owner. And so that will probably bring some type of cautiousness or consideration as towards your charitable mission. So in other words, whatever that enterprise that is that subsidiary should fall in line with your overall charitable mission at the parent level. Unless again, it's a passive investment, because nonprofit, just like any other corporation or individual, can make investments in stocks and et cetera, and things like that, but they're very limited. And so it's different from having a subsidiary, which is you're more involved and more, really partaking in the decision-making there. And then of course, there's other sort of enterprising that nonprofits can do, so long as, they're not going over their sort of unrelated taxable income is what they call it. So I think it's just good to know that there's options, especially when someone who's creating a nonprofit for the first time and they have a strong passion, or even social enterprise, they may not quite understand all the options that are available to them to really make themselves sustainable over the long term.
Right.
It does take some planning, right? It does take some planning and strategy, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, and that's just a good illustration and helpful for people to see. I call myself a recovering attorney, meaning I used to practice and I no longer practice. But if you have somebody, if you are thinking through these issues, definitely have somebody like Elizabeth in your corner who can help you walk through it, because it's possible. There is a path. You just have to find the right way to do it. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. Dorothy Kozlowski had a question that I think, Brad, you're really well positioned to help answer. She put it in the chat for everybody. It says, as I think whether or not the work I'm doing should develop into a nonprofit social enterprise, where does financial stability rank in my planning and thought process? Brad, can you talk about how, as you made decisions about the Made Free brand, sustainability played into your decision making?
Absolutely. I always tell people when they have a great business idea, I say, have you done the cost due diligence? Have you looked at all the numbers? Because I think we get really excited about an idea and we may look at what we can maybe sell the idea for, but we really, I think, underestimate the value of going through the total cost of running a nonprofit or a for-profit. The money goes away pretty fast, and you're not left with any margin many times. So this was a huge part of what drove our decision to actually start the business. My first question was, can we achieve our social impact goals and be sustainable? Can we create the funds to run the operation? And the answer was yes. Obviously, we've been doing that. But I think it's so important that you look at every aspect of running your business. And if you're selling a service, you gotta look at, well, what's the overhead costs? What am I going to have to pay people or rent, and all these different things. And in our case, we're an inventory-based company, so we have to inventory a lot of goods, and that's very, very costly and hits your cash flow in a big way, because you have delayed payment. You invest in your inventory and you may not sell it for months, and you have to finance that. So highly recommend anybody before they start a business, they need to do their P&L sheet, basically profit and loss sheet in detail.
And spend a moment on that right there, because one of the things, I introduced your business, but I want you to introduce your business because you'll be able to give the impact of it better than I will. And I want people to hear the juxtaposition between sort of what the purpose of what you're doing and something as concrete as a P&L statement, and know that those things can go together. So can you talk a little bit more about what Made Free does and what's the purpose behind what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the fashion space. We're basically a bag company. We make backpacks and tote bags as our primary product. But this came out of a desire that I personally had, and my wife got involved very soon after, because she had the same passion. And that is that we saw the world of poverty, human trafficking, and slavery, and how big it is, and how important it is to work on. It started with me traveling to Kenya and Ethiopia and seeing firsthand extreme poverty and injustice, and then eventually India, where we do our work now. And what we saw were that people were destitute in poverty. And when they're destitute in poverty, they're the most vulnerable to be human trafficked or just tricked into a really bad job, which is a slavery type job that they can't get out. But if they have a sustainable job, there's hope for them. There's potential for them to avoid being tricked or even prostituting themselves because they have no other option. So what drove our business was looking at the consumer trends. So this was about 11 years ago when I did that trip. And at the time I saw that the millennial generation, the largest generation in history, and now Gen Z is right there with them, were very interested and concerned about social issues and wanted to align their consumer spending with making a difference in the world. So that was very prevalent then, and it's even more prevalent now, obviously. And so I looked at what do consumers spend a lot on, and when it becomes really obvious that we all participate in fashion of some kind. And when you look at the data, 1 in 6 people in the world work in the apparel industry, okay? So huge numbers. And unfortunately, most of that industry is in North and South Asia. And it's growing at an alarming rate in South Asia because North Asia, China, is too expensive in the world of fashion. So what happens is these people that are in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India are driving the fashion industry right now. And the legal minimum wage in Bangladesh is less than $2 a day. Well, the World Bank defines poverty as living on $2 a day, $1.90 to be exact. And so we looked at that situation and we said, this is a problem, okay? And we had a burning desire to come up with a solution, okay? That's what drives Made Free is creating freedom jobs for the most vulnerable. So when you look at, here's the problem, vulnerable people needing jobs. What industry is impacting poverty the most? Fashion. How can we participate in fashion and change consumer behavior? Well, when you look at business and any business in general, anybody who's grown or captured market has to have a compelling a reason for consumers to change behavior. As much as we'd like to think, and it can't be just this one thing, as much as we'd like to think that, well, if I buy something that helps people, if the product helps people, then people will buy it in droves. Not necessarily, because it has to be a viable product, which sounds basic, but you'd be surprised at how many people think, well, yeah, it may cost a little more and the quality isn't very good, but it helps people. So people must buy it, and they will buy it. Well, they won't. It's just the reality. So in the fashion space, what we realize is that we have to be best in class on product and value and be competitive on price, okay? And create life-changing jobs. So the first thing I did was I did the spreadsheet, the P&L. I said, okay, our goal is to pay people sustainable wages that are life-changing. So it's about $8 a day in South Asia. That's the game-changing wage, $8. From 2 to 8, right? Big jump. And when I looked at the supply chain, the raw materials, the manufacturing cost, and all that, I concluded that it can be done. It can be done. In fact, one statistic that's really alarming is that you can double the wage of an apparel maker and it'll add 3 cents to the retail price of a t-shirt.
3
That's
cents.
it, 3 cents, double the wage of a t-shirt maker. So there really isn't an excuse for this. Most people think, well, you must have to pay people, you know, these poverty wages to be competitive. And what we found out was no, you don't. So that was the big aha moment for me. I'm like, okay, we got to do this. And so we've been working on this for 10 years and it's growing. It's been slow, but we've had some significant growth in the last couple of years because of the trends in business and consumers wanting to align their brand or their person with ethical brands that do things. So our products are competitive on price. we have a backpack that's as good as any of the top brands. It's made out of sustainable materials. And more importantly, the makers of that bag have a new lease on life. They have the opportunity to provide for themselves and their families. We just got a corporate order from a Fortune 50 company that's creating 200 jobs for women in South India. And these women, most of them admitted prior to getting this job that they were suicidal, and so no alternative but to prostitute themselves if this job didn't come along.
Yeah,
So,
it's, I mean,
the long
it's
answer,
amazing to
sorry.
think about. No, that's exactly what I wanted, because I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of sort of the impact of what you're talking about when you talk about the P&L, but the fact that the P&L exists keeps the impact going. It's like that's the magic of what we're doing. We're trying to do here with this whole, kind of mini conference, and what you're doing, within Made Free. So that's great. Really appreciate that story. Want to hear a little bit from George Brigandy. Brigandy is the right way, right? Olivia told me that was the right way, and my Northern New York accent, my Buffalo, New York accent fits here. So yes, excellent. Thank you for joining us. He's from DePaul as well, and you're teaching in the Master of Science in Sustainability Management. One of the things, to me, this is, I want you to talk specifically about what you're doing and what you're encouraging students to do at DePaul as well. But one of the things in my brain when I think about sustainability is circles that can continue. I don't know if you see that in your practice, and if you do see it, I'd love for you to talk about some places where that kind of highlights, or a couple things, where you've seen that take hold. And because to me, that the impact on business is totally, to me, it's a one-to-one impact. If you can create a circle in business, you have a business. You can grow it, you can change it, you can make real impact, it can keep going, it can get bigger than you. And so if you're seeing those same circles, I'd love to hear more about it, and hear more about what you're doing at DePaul.
Sure. I'm the, as you mentioned, director of the MSSM, and I teach sustainability management, which is a master's level course as well. And what I emphasize in the program in my class really is practicality one. So I want my students to basically take what they learn in the course and give them the skill set and know-how to be able to go out into their employer, their future employer, and do. There's a lot of really wonderful theory being taught out there across all disciplines, sustainability included. But I certainly experienced it in some of my courses where I was like, well, this is good and all, but how the heck am I going to make my business more sustainable? So I hone in really on identifying need areas and then what it will take to implement sustainable solutions. And so we really have a broad approach to sustainability because it can mean so many different things. It's pretty ambiguous if you think about it. But I really try to teach them all the opportunity that lies within supply chain, HR, finance. There are so many areas to save and also create more value. I believe it was Elizabeth at the upfront who was discussing value, and traditionally that's just been cash. But my generation, Brad mentioned millennials. I'm a proud millennial. Gen Z below us, who's even a little more ramped up on the sustainability, they're saying, hey, I recognize that this service, this brand is creating more value outside of just the initial cash that is visible. So we're looking for that in the social benefits, like, again, Brad mentioned, for those employees or the communities that these companies or entities function within, as well as the environmental benefit. And then recognizing, to your point, Adam, that that's all circular. This is all focused on circularity. Companies need to ensure that wherever they're sourcing goods from, the communities they're living in, are all pretty much thriving because that's going to impact their bottom line in the long run. If there is not a forest to harvest timber from in 10 years, what the heck does it matter if you're making as much money as you can right now? Your business won't be around in 10 years. So ensuring that those processes are managing themselves well and effectively, and thinking more than just a year or two out from a profitability standpoint and a value standpoint.
Yeah, that long-term thinking is so critical, and it relates exactly back to what Bhavan was mentioning. The question of when he was first, sort of fundraising or going out to folks and pitching them on the concept. Well, I want to give you this money to start, but I don't want you coming back in 4 years. That's short-term thinking. I want you thinking long-term. So I want you to take this seed money and grow this thing that's bigger than this 4-year deal. That's exactly what you're talking about, which is if I'm a company, I want to build a process that is a circle that can maintain, because I want my company, not, it can be altruistic as well, but also I want my company to be bigger and stronger and faster in 4 years. I want to grow. I think there's such a crossover with that that sometimes it's easy to lose sight of, that there's a benefit too. There's also, it's not just good for everybody. It's also good for you to be around in, a few years. So no, that's huge. When you have students who are, and knowing that they're Gen Zs and millennials, which I have too many gray hairs to exactly be, but when you think about the kinds of work they're focused on, it sounds like you've seen a change. Do you, or you see sort of a certain kind of focus? Are you seeing your group of kids from DePaul going into like a bulk of industries? Like, are they trending one way, or are they taking this attitude with them in all sorts of directions?
That's a good question. I will say, of the courses I've taught to this point and the folks in the MSSM program, they appear to be in a pretty diverse array of industries. HR sticks out to me in particular.
Interesting.
But that is an interesting topic I'm glad we're bringing up as well, because for a lot of young people, really, I would say from my age down, my age up, if you wanted to start a career in sustainability, it has meant that you've had to transition from a past career somewhere else in marketing, finance, and entrepreneur or engineering.
Right.
And so you've had to think, how the heck can I utilize the skills and knowledge that I have to this point to conduct a sustainable career? And that's a big question for a lot of these young people, because they're in that transition period. So I'm trying to help them figure out how they can do just that. And so working for someone like a social enterprise or a mission-driven Fortune 500 that is incorporating these other components or other values into their bottom line and saying, hey, we are still trying to make money, we're trying to do good for the planet and people, but we need somebody to help us tell our story. We need an accountant who will help us figure out how to save and track all these different metrics across departments. They still need those. What I'm trying to get is they still need those everyday business functions that folks might have to succeed and thrive and grow and profit. So just because you're not LEED certified, just because you don't have a background in chemistry or some other science area, I started out in general marketing, does not mean you cannot get into sustainability and do good.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and you still need to have be able to do a P&L just like Brad can do, and that's it. He can do such great work, and do P&L. You have to be able to do both. And in some ways, it's the opportunity, I feel like, of these times, which is exciting. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all sharing, and appreciate the panel. George, Brad, and Elizabeth, appreciate you all and the work that you do. We will make your information available to anybody that asks us for it, if that's all right. We won't give them your private phone numbers, which you've given. No, I'm just kidding. But we will pass along your emails and any contact information that that anybody asks us for. Appreciate you guys taking the time to spend with us. And thank you so much, everybody, to spending the time with us for this sort of little mini conference on sustainability. I'll say another thank you to Chicago Community Loan Fund, www.cclfchicago.org. If you haven't looked into them yet, really appreciate their support in this, and appreciate Mox.E and the Coleman Entrepreneurship Center at DePaul for being a part of bringing this to you all. Thank you so much. This won't be the last one of these that we do. We will, so feel free to reach out to us directly at Mox.E or Emily Doyle at DePaul. And if you don't see anything from us or have any questions in the near future, we will be glad to answer them. So thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.